looking at the overall pattern, we see that we're probably starting in G major, right? 1 sharp, G chord here. But by the time we get to the fermata, we've had some naturals here, and we end up on a C chord. So probably modulation. Then by the time we get back to here, we've got a D dominant 7th and a 1 chord in G. So we probably modulate back to G. So our job is to find how do we get from G to here, this other key, and how do we get from this other key back to G. Okay? So let's say, again, according to my method that I just outlined, where in looking at this do you first clearly see like has to be C major?
And that third beat of the second full measure.
Right.
Well, that's the C major chord itself.
That's a
But
fermata.
what about
we're going
before,
back.
what chord before, at the fermata, yeah, that's the cadence, we're already in C.
It's
But
F.
But work
become
backwards, what's,
natural.
okay, so let's
So
say
there's
we're in
an
C.
F.
That's 1. What's the chord just before that? If that's 1, it's C.
GBD.
So just before there's a G, but there's an F before that.
Right, so, well, the G would be 5, right? And the F would be 4. And all of those are in the key of C. There's no way we could
Oh,
reinterpret
there's
those in the
a
key of G.
suspended, and then the fourth beat of the first full measure. That's really a C, but it's a suspended,
Right, the D is a suspension.
yeah.
So that would be 1 in the key of C. But could we use that as a common chord between
Yeah.
C and G?
Yeah, because it could be the fifth,
No, not the 5th.
or sorry, the
Sixth.
fourth of
The
G.
fourth.
Four.
Yeah, so, oh,
Yeah,
actually.
the opposite, yeah.
Why was I thinking 7 before that F?
So in the key of G, that would be a 4/6, which would become in the new key 6, it becomes a 1/6. So I would, this would be 1, 1, 5, 6, 1, 4, 6, which becomes 1, 6, 4, 5, 1. Going too fast?
Let's just hope the people that are watching this do not get a little bit more slower than they, I don't know.
Well, so in other words, we see that we arrive here in C here. We know that for sure. So if we start backtracking though, really this chord here with the F naturals, that's still definitely in the key of C. You can't interpret that in the key of G. So if you take that chord and go back 1, that's where you find your common chord, this chord, which as you said, this is a suspension, this D is a suspension. So it should be E, C, and G. Notice first inversion with the soprano double. And that becomes our common chord. It's 4, 6 in G major, the old key, becomes 1, 6 in C major, the new key, and continues on the normal chord progression. Yeah, Steve?
So I see that, but I am also just not sure why, after the pivot, that the 4 couldn't have been a, oh, well, it's an F chord, so that wouldn't have been a 7th in G. Okay, I just answered my question.
Yeah, yeah.
I was thinking it of a dominant 7th there for some reason. Because every other chord after that you could look at and say, okay, well, we're back in G with the beat 2 chord, and then C could just be a 4th of the G, and then we're back in G again of the beat 4
And it could be a
chord.
plagal cadence, this could be 1 to 4.
Yeah.
And that could
Yeah.
be some sort of plagal cadence of the fermata there. But
Right,
yeah, but it's
right.
the F chord that really throws us into the new key. And that's definitely going to make it sound.
Because there's nothing there that says G.
Yeah, I mean, see if I could play that. But so that's the first one. I'm just going to not play the when you hit that, those F naturals, it's like, wow, okay, that's different.
Yeah,
And you get to the new key.
got it, okay.
And then, remember, we're gonna see how we journey back to G here. Actually, this is more, oh, you know what? Well, let's see, let me ask you, so you guys, where do you see, like, or where do you hear harmonies that put you back in the key of G again?
Well, there is that E minor 7th, second beat of the third full measure. That sort of looks more like a passing.
Yeah, I mean, but it could be an E minor, or like you say, it could be an E minor 7. I would say just E minor with the passing. But if you go even before that, what's the chord before that?
There's some sort of D.
Some sort of
Maybe
D.
D minor.
No, because the F sharp is
Oh,
gone.
still
It's a
right.
five.
Measure.
Right,
So, or
it's
the F sharp is
it's a
back.
D, yeah.
So it's a D, it's really is, the F sharp is there, so it's really a D, or a 5 chord in G.
Yeah.
And then this is a G chord. So actually, we probably would not label this a common chord modulation. There's something else that I haven't mentioned to you. We call it a direct modulation.
Yeah.
And that's where you just go into the new key. And this would really qualify as a direct modulation for two reasons. One, because you get so quickly into the new key. I mean, you could say something like, well, this is 5, and that's going to become 1 in the new key, right? But remember I said 5 usually isn't used as a pivot chord for the first thing. But the other thing is, a direct modulation is often also called a phrase modulation, because it happens between phrases. So one phrase will be or end in one key, and the next phrase will start in the new key. And this, you know, the G chord going right away to the D chord would, in my mind, qualifies it for direct modulation. And we would just say that this is, we're back in the key of G, and this is 1, and this is 5, without a common chord. Does that make sense?
Sounds like the key is that it's used at the beginning of a phrase, when you really want to
Yeah.
make a point of going.
Well, in other words, and in looking for modulations and analyzing modulations, the first thing you do want to do is look for a common chord, because that is the most common kind of modulation. But if that fails, or if it doesn't seem to make sense at all, then you can start looking for other types of modulation. One of them would be a direct modulation. Another possibility would be a modulation by sequence.
Or inharmonic.
Or an well, that's, you know, more advanced. That'd be inharmonic reinterpretation. But you want to make sure it's not a common chord modulation. But in this case, because, you know, with the fermata, there's a pause there and the phrase ends. And the new phrase seems to start, really it seems to make sense more in the key of G. You've got 1, 5, 6, 4, maybe some sort of 5, 7 at the end here. 1. And so it really just is pretty G major, so after the fermata it starts in G again. And so that's why I would say this is, you're more likely to interpret this as a direct modulation or a phrase modulation than a common